As a kid, I remember finding the best special places. One in particular was under a huge bush at the corner of our yard. It was big enough to hide under and even take a small suitcase when I had planned to run away from home. I could stay there for hours and dream in the quiet of the surrounding greenery. It was magical in a way, and perhaps spiritual, giving me an opportunity to reflect, dream, and be connected to nature, or at least the nature in my backyard, grass, bugs, dirt, and the like. Many of us have places that evoke memories or connections to ourselves in ways that can be difficult to fully articulate. Maybe a place where we can just be. That can translate for some as spiritual or religious practices of various kinds. And I believe deeply that there is no one right way, but the way that is right for each of us, that can take practice, but mostly approaching a space, any space, with an open heart and having the best mindset for being absolutely present. There are, of course, actual places that are considered spiritual or healing. I don't know if that was what this episode will evoke in any of you, because it's so personal in nature and community at the same time. Prayer and spiritual awakenings can occur in community and in isolation. And the key to both is how we approach it and our openness to receiving what is offered in whatever form it comes. That doesn't mean we aren't discerning, but it does mean we are connected to ourselves first, allowing us to be open to being fully present. At various times in my life, I feel I've been lucky enough to be in the presence of something so much greater than myself. I like to call them moments of clarity and connection, and usually when I feel something about someone else, because they have let me into their present open space and allowed me to be with them, really be with them. To me, that is truly a spiritual moment. Now, if I could only do that for myself, especially when in a quandary, but with practice, I believe it's possible. There are locations across the globe that offer connection. They are deemed spiritual and some are deemed healing places. I'm not sure I differentiate in how I would sort of perceive that, because I think sometimes they can be one and the same. But there are places in India, Peru, South Africa, California, Bali, Japan, Australia, Turkey, Israel, Jordan, Colorado, Spain, Guatemala, Tibet, and I'm sure many, many more. They have come about for various reasons, and one you may not have heard of is our featured podcast today, and created with the tenacity of one man and the determination of many. That's their actual tagline, and I love it. The determination is really to sustain it, as the creator and founder is no longer with us. Welcome to Small and Gutsy, our podcast featuring nonprofits and social enterprises under $10 million. My name is Dr. Laura Shirk-Witkoff, and I'm excited and proud to be your host. We hope you'll love the stories as much as we do, and perhaps you will find needed services, a job, volunteer, invest in, or donate. Small and Gutsy is not just a podcast, but a 501c3 nonprofit. Our vision is to spotlight every smaller nonprofit and social enterprise to raise their visibility. So please help me with our vision and send me any organization you'd like featured to laura@smallandgutsy.org. Salvation Mountain is a literal man-made mountain, 38 years in the making, covered in 500,000 gallons of latex paint. What started as a small monument made of dirt and painted cement became, over time, a sprawling adobe and hay bale mountain complex with peripheral structures made of telephone poles, tires, and car windows, as well as art cars and sculptures, all painted in a patchwork of stripes and color blocks of whatever paint was donated that week. Leonard Knight, the creator of Salvation Mountain, a self-made artist and evangelist to the liking of the biblical John the Baptist, was born in 1931 to a farming family in Vermont. He dropped out of high school, served in the U.S. Army, and worked mostly as a mechanic. In 1967, he found God in an unusual way and suddenly found a life of servitude. Having been somewhat of a painter, he began his evangelism by painting his vehicles and decorating them with images and Bible verses until one day in 1970 when he saw a hot air balloon for the first time. For the next 15 years, it was his mission to build or buy a balloon like that and have it share God's love with as many people as possible. That vision ended one day in 1986 when that balloon rotted out in Nyland, California, where there was a slab city on the western edge of the Sonoran Desert. That Leonard decided to build a small monument to remember his vision, but ended up building what we know today as Salvation Mountain, a larger-than-life adobe clay sculpture that adorned this same message and much more. 27 years later, when he passed away in 2014, he was known as the most visited man on earth, and his mountain message had been shared to nearly every corner of the earth. Salvation Mountain is going strong, and my guest today will share his experience meeting and working with Leonard, and now is the CEO of Salvation Mountain, Bob Levesque. Mostly self-employed for the past 30 years, he came to know Leonard in 2006 during a family visit. After having his life touched by the work and devotion of Leonard, he was called upon by the family in 2011 to intervene when Leonard was placed in a nursing home. From that day on, Bob has been part of the preservation board to help keep Leonard's work and vision alive. Over the next 12 plus years, Bob and a group of incredible individuals have secured Leonard's vision and continue its preservation and intend to do so for many years to come. I'm so excited to introduce my guest today, Bob Levesque, CEO of Salvation Mountain. So let's get started. Welcome, Bob. Please, I think your passion is clear, but I'd love to hear it in your own words and how you were really touched by meeting Leonard and how that really came about. So welcome to Small and Gutsy.
Well, thank you for having me, Laura. This is a great opportunity. First, let me say that I love the idea of your show. I recently was doing some research on 501c3s and discovered that a very, very small percentage, only 5% are the ones that are over $2 million, and that there are literally hundreds of thousands of nonprofits across the country, across the world. So thank you for doing what you do. This is a wonderful opportunity for us. And I also wanted to tell you that your introduction was incredible. If the podcast industry doesn't work out for you, we definitely would have a PR place for you at Salvation Mountain.
I love it. Thank you.
Make a wonderful tour guide. You got all the details down.
Good. Well, you do a lot of good PR on your site. And I think the story is really interesting and so unusual. So thank you. And I'm just so happy that you're part of the Small and Gutsy family, because Leonard was clearly small and gutsy, and he became large and impactful, right? Which is what we hope these small organizations do. So how did you, I know it's through family, but then how did you get touched by this and decide this is how you want to spend your life, really?
My mother-in-law was Leonard's younger sister. That's how the relationship in the family is. And we would sit here in the house on the couch. She passed away about 6 years ago, but prior to that, we would sit here on the couch prior to ever meeting Leonard, and she'd flip through the books and the newspaper articles that he would send her. He was quite proud and constantly would mail things off to his family members. And she would sit through and show me pictures. And, you know, it's almost like sometimes looking through a coloring book or a child's storybook, you don't really get a concept for what's really going on in the story. You just think, wow, that's pretty incredible. Well, when you drive down the road in Nyland, and it's actually the border of a very unknown city called Slab City, which is an off-grid community of its own, which is probably a whole nother show. But Leonard seemed to enjoy the environment of being in that kind of community with people that were living off-grid and living the way they wanted to, free. So I just want to throw that in there. So when we drove down the road, Beale Road in Nyland, and approached the mountain, even from afar, you look and you don't really get a concept. But when you pull in the driveway and get out of the car and you just stand there and you look at a piece of sculpture that's 300 feet wide by 80 or so feet tall, with, as you said, so many diverse features to it, covered in Bible scripture, with the huge heart right in the middle. Of course, you can see that in the images. It just takes your breath away. You know, it brings you to a place. I really enjoyed in your intro, you talked about spiritual journeys. And, you know, for the 50 to 60,000 people who we estimate visit a year at Salvation Mountain, they all come to have their own experience. And that was really what Leonard wanted that mountain to be. He wanted it to crumble back into the earth because he didn't think anybody would be willing to take care of it. Um, we proved him wrong, and we proved several professionals in the art industry wrong.
Yeah.
They thought this mountain wouldn't last for 5 or 10 years. Uh,
Hmm.
we're just celebrating our 10 years of preservation, by the way. We just passed our celebration for 10 years of preserving his work. And
Wow.
I think we've done a good job. And I believe that with the efforts that we're doing, it's going to last for another 50 or 100 years if we can find the next generation of people to help preserve.
Amazing.
The awesomeness of the work, the dedication, the commitment, and just watching Leonard just run around and wanting to show everybody. And he was like a kid. He just had to show everybody his work and his stuff, his toys
Hmm.
and his art, and so you could take it home and put it on your fridge. His underlining mission, of course, was to share the message of God's love and the simplicity of salvation. But that the idea of that was just an overwhelming thing. So, I had a life in Christianity, in and out of Christianity over the years, and probably wasn't in the best place, more involved in growing my business and being wealthy one day, and not really thinking about any of these things to take, first of all, take that, what turned into a almost 4 day journey to drive across country with mom. She didn't like to fly. So we had to drive and then down into this desertous, dusty area that was way outside my box for sure.
Hmm.
And then to experience this. I was one of the fortunate ones because Norma was with us, his
Hmm.
younger sister. Well, we took Leonard home every night back to the hotel. We went out to dinner and brought him back to the hotel and hung around, and they liked to jump in the hot tub together. And I had a very unusual experience, which was almost overwhelming at times, to spend that much time with Leonard and to be ministered to. Really,
Hmm.
uh, it really impacted my life deeply.
And then what made you decide to stay? Because you ended up staying. Did you end up staying after that visit, or was it sometime later?
It was later. At first, we had to get back home, and I was growing a small business back then, so I had to get back to the grind, so to speak. And it always just sat there on my heart, about this work and this man, and of course, living with Norma here, it constantly came up, over time. It was the point that he ended up in the nursing home that really sunk the hook, so to speak.
Hmm.
When we received a call from several of his very close friends that had been locked out of the nursing home. That's when, yeah, and no one in the family really knew what to do, and they were all elderly like him. He was the second youngest in the family, so third youngest in the family.
Hmm.
That's when I got to Norma, to my mother-in-law, and she says the funniest thing, Laura. She sat there on the phone with her brother Frank, and they talked, and she everything was going well. And then she said, "Bob, would you take this phone?" And she handed me the phone. It's like that, and it was Frank, Uncle Frank, and he started to tell me that Leonard was in the nursing home and that we needed to help. There are people that wanted to be in there with them and spend time in there with them and visit. And Dan Westfald, who was a close personal friend and also our former president,
Hmm.
was one of those individuals, and he had been taking very good care of Leonard's health care going up to that point and getting into the nursing home. So that when they suddenly decided to lock everyone out except family,
Hmm.
he went from being right there, Leonard's right hand man, to being stuck out in the parking lot. So
Wow.
it was very dramatic for him because he'd been close to Leonard for many years. So we immediately got that fixed and started to allow different folks out there to visit him in the nursing home. So he had some people to socialize with.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
turned out he loved the nursing home. Of course, it was air conditioned. The beds were comfortable, and there was 3 hot meals a day.
Yeah.
Quite a contradiction to his life in the desert for 27 years.
Amazing.
So he
Hmm.
enjoyed that, and the people in the nursing home loved him because he was such a sweet man. He just loved everyone, and everything was always great in his eyes, and he just enjoyed every moment. So
He sounds like an incredibly positive person. I know that he was disappointed around the balloon not working out and then thinking, well, I'll just leave something in this place so I can. And then before he knew it, people were donating paint. And it feels like it was a very organic, iterative process that emerged into this very enormous sculpture. And can you go, it sounds like you can go inside the sculpture.
There are two areas of the this we call it the site because it's really made up of six Adobe objects. Several of them are connected together, but there are
Got
others
it.
that aren't. That are kind of non-connected objects. It was going to dome it over. If you actually look at it, you can see it was coming into a dome like a balloon, and it was going to engulf the top and then connect with the mountain, the ledge behind it, and it was intended to look like a replica of his half-inflated balloon, which was never fully inflated. Any time anybody got to see it, it was only half inflated anyhow. So that structure there had an enormous interior. I'll only describe little bits of it to you, but he created
Mm-hmm.
tire trees by piling tires on top of each other and then completely covering
Mm-hmm.
them in mud, in clay, mud, and would sculpt them into shapes to make it look like tree
Mm-hmm.
bark, etc. And then he would drag limbs from the desert and stick them in it as he went. Those limbs would ultimately support the bales of hay that he put in and the dome that he was creating. It's kind of a phenomenon to most architects and engineers who came out. They kind of scratched their heads when they looked at it and said,
Yeah.
"How are you getting this to stay up?" Yeah. Back to the point, the museum and the Hogan, which is kind of like an igloo, are the two things that he created that you can go inside of. They both started when a
Mm-hmm.
farmer delivered pretty much a truckload of bales of old hay. They heard about what he was doing. They thought he used hay
Mm-hmm.
in the clay when he mixed it, so they figured they'd give him a bunch of it. And when he saw how much of it he had, he started to create these structures with it and cover them almost like hay bricks, if you want to call them, cinder blocks.
Right. Which cultures have done for years to create adobes and other kinds of structures,
Absolutely,
which is
absolutely.
amazing.
So
Mm-hmm. And did he do that on his own, or were there people who started to come and actually do the building with him?
yeah, he often had going into the 90s in the first 3 years, he didn't have a whole bunch of help. There were people in the slabs that would drive in and out. The slab city was made up of a lot of snowbirds. A lot of people from Canada would stay there, so they would just emanate towards Leonard, because he was doing this crazy thing out there. So they'd kind of hang around and they'd offer to help, so he'd get some help. But then going into the 90s, when the mountain started to get more popularity, people started coming from all over the world. Uh, when that started to happen, more people started to creep out of the woodworks for one reason or another,
Wow.
and they'd want to go there and spend time, spend a day, spend a weekend. And yes, they would help. We often say he did the whole thing by himself, but honestly, he
Mm-hmm.
did have help. A lot of people were there helping him do things. Uh, I will tell you that putting the bales of hay up on the museum, we have video footage watching him. We can watch patiently while he actually pushes those bales of hay up a ladder, 30, 40-foot ladder by himself, gets it to the top and gets it up there and jockeys it into place.
Amazing.
And he did a lot of that himself. He did a lot of it early in the morning before anybody got there.
Wow.
Sometimes he would get up before the sun came up if there was a full moon, and he would work by the moonlight out
Mm-hmm.
there. So he did do most of it himself, but he did
Mm-hmm.
have help along the way.
Yeah, well, I would have imagined, but it sounds like it was
Yes,
his
yes.
creative spirit that was really pushing this forth, you know? And when you drive up, so there are various ways you can go inside, and people spend all kinds of, sometimes they'll spend a couple hours, sometimes they'll spend a day. And I guess it just varies from person
Yeah,
to
well,
person.
since Leonard's not there, when Leonard was there, they would come and they would spend an hour or two. Very few people would come and go because Leonard was there, and
Mm-hmm.
if he was already there talking to other people, they would kind of flock around him and listen to what he had to say. And lots of times he was
Mm-hmm.
telling his story, and sometimes people would ask him about the Bible. So he loved to talk about the Bible. He didn't force it down
Mm-hmm.
anyone's throat, but if someone asked him questions, he sure got into it, and he'd like to talk about God and the Bible. Um, so people then they tended to spend more time, and some people would spend days at a time. Some would come for weekends because they could be around Leonard
Mm-hmm.
and help him with his work. Since he's passed away, that experience is no longer there. That part of the experience is no longer there. So they tend to come and go a lot more quickly. It's like an item on the list, the bucket list maybe, or just the list of things in the area. We have several other art attractions. East Jesus in Slab City. Slab City is an art-driven community, so there's lots of art stuff to see there. Not too far away is Bombay Beach, which is another art
Mm-hmm.
environment there in our community. So people come to this desertous area out in the middle of nowhere. While they're there, they visit Salvation Mountain and then they visit anything else they can around the area.
Do you hear from other local artists in the area in terms of their either interest in sort of supporting or maybe inspiration from what Leonard did?
We've actually had artists come out and do internships from local universities. They have come out and done, amazing things, working on the mountain and then being inspired. Lots of people are inspired. We've had musicians that have come and then
Mm-hmm.
written songs afterwards. People written that have written songs while they were there. Yes, the
Wow.
inspiration of Leonard, his work, and his creativity inspire people really all the time. I wish we heard more about those things, but we don't always yet.
That may be more of what you can draw out in the future, just because it sounds like that's a way to sustain support for Salvation Mountain as you move forward or want the next gen. Is it at this point? Is it uh, it's open to everyone and it doesn't and it's free, or do you charge, or do you ask for donations? How does that work?
Yeah, no, Leonard was very specific. We were fortunate enough, a filmmaker named Larry Used from Los Angeles, California,
Mm-hmm.
had come out and taken a strong interest in Leonard back in 1994. Um, he came out and he documented the mountain with pictures. He was a photographer and a filmmaker, and he took lots of video. In the process of doing those videos, he made two documentaries, and he also did what we call Leonard's Living Will, where he asked Leonard all those questions that everybody wanted to know about. What do you want to happen to the mountain? Who do you want to take care of it?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to see done? How do you want things fixed? So we have the privilege of having that video, so we know exactly what Leonard wanted. What he wanted was the site to be free forever. He didn't want anyone to ever charge admission. He
Mm-hmm.
didn't want it to be fenced off from the public where they had to only see it from afar. He didn't want a glass to be under a glass dome. He thought if the museum people got involved, they might want to put it under a glass dome of some kind to keep it protected. He didn't want to see any of that stuff happen. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, the site is open and free. We do try to. It's always sunrise to sunset. But free to the public, absolutely. There'll never be an admission. We One of the things that we've shifted to over the past 5 or 6 years to help with fundraising was developing a filming permit process. So when commercial companies come out there and they want to do filming, they want to use it as a backdrop to do. Martha Stewart used the mountain for her fall wedding collection one year, and we've had several Coldplay and Third Day, two rock bands, Christian rock bands,
Mm-hmm.
came out there and shot videos there. So those kind of things go on. We ask for a donation for those things, but we allow individual documentarians or student that want to come out and do filming projects. We don't charge them anything. We always ask for a donation if they are able to do so, because that's really all we have to draw from for the most part for fundraising for our gym.
I mean, it makes sense. If you're talking about sustainability, you have to think, how do you, because there's maintenance pieces and things need to be repaired. So I think that's incredibly reasonable. And I love that you're still honoring Leonard's vision and his intention, which is it should be open for anybody who wants to see it and anyone who wants to be inspired. And so it really is quite a beautiful commentary on his life, frankly, his life's
Right.
work. And so for those folks who have been inspired and either written music or benefited in some way, it would be great if they could turn back and say, okay, you've inspired me. I'd like to make a donation and for the sustainability of Salvation Mountain.
Realizing you alluded to earlier, it's really hard to raise funds for what essentially is an outdoor museum when the
Mm-hmm.
creator says never to charge anybody admission.
Right, right,
We don't
right.
do any
Yeah,
on-site sponsorships. You can't give
right,
us $500 and we'll put a banner up somewhere for you. We don't do any
right,
of that stuff. So it's a
right.
very, very challenging financial obligation. The only thing that is steady is our steady traffic flow of people coming. Uh, but we've been creative over the years. We've of course created an online gift shop, so now you can get merch. come to the site. We use QR codes on the site. That's the one thing we do to help raise funds is we have QR codes for donations for almost all the Cash Apps now. And we also offer a video tour, and the merch opportunity takes them to the website while they're there and while they're feeling inspired to possibly buy something, from the collection of things we have for sale on the website.
Is when someone comes, is there an opportunity if someone is around to get sort of a tour, or is that mostly audio that you have set up, or how does that work?
What we've done is kind of a self-guided tour, and we're still developing that. I'm actually in the process right now of putting together a map with some numbering, location numbering, and some
Mm-hmm.
history to go along with it. But in the beginning stages, we're being 10 years old, we're still very young. So,
Yeah,
it's
for
taken
sure.
time for us to get to the point where we're prepared to start doing this stuff. We've fallen back on Leonard's video tour that he did in the late 90s or early 2000. He wanted people to videotape him doing a tour so that he could put it on DVD and
Mm-hmm.
send it to all the nursing homes and shut-ins. So that was his
Mm-hmm.
vision, and he created a tour. So we've used that. Started using that QR code was probably the first one we started to use, so
That's
that when
great.
people did go there, they had something to do as far as the tour went. He didn't have a concept for the idea of Dawson's. People being there. Although he came from a family, his mother was a Dawson in the museum. His only aspiration after he died was that there be a caretaker there and somebody that would look after the art
Mm-hmm.
and be able to
Mm-hmm.
talk to people, but keep the art protected and keep it open for everyone. Um, we've introduced the idea of Dawson's, and it's been a long and growing process. And I've been working on it for
Mm-hmm.
several years, but we finally finished
Yeah.
and got something ready to print. And we introduced that to the Dawsons, and we now give them pretty much all of Leonard's history from the day he was born until the day he died, and even beyond that, in small, quantifiable ways to make it easy for them to learn and to be able to communicate. So we've started to use the Dawsons as well to do tours. Depending on what day of the week, usually on the weekends, we have multiple layers of Dawsons there. It's a very strong likelihood that you'll be able to get an impromptu tour right away. If you show up and you ask for a tour, if Ron's available, he'll come out and give you a tour. If the Dawson that is on site, because they vary every day and throughout the day, if they're capable of doing so, they will. If you're a structured guy like some of us are, and you like to make schedules, and you're going to be at Salvation Mountain on a certain day, and while you're there, you'd really love a tour, contact us ahead of time and let us know that, and we'll make that happen for you.
That's great. Are there, do you accept physical donations? Because I know historically you did as the mountain was kind of getting developed and growing. So you mentioned the hay, and I read that there's, how many gallons of latex paint. So I don't know if people donate things still, or whether you've sort of capped out on that because Leonard's no longer with us. What's your?
Yeah, no, that's we still don't buy much paint. We have had
Mm,
to purchase paint from time to time because
mm-hmm,
the primary colors, which he used a lot of, the
mm-hmm,
reds, the yellow, the
mm-hmm,
blues, the greens. We
mm-hmm.
don't often get as much of those as we would like. So occasionally we do have to buy 5-gallon pails of those colors.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, we get donations. I'll say almost weekly of paint. We have paint companies that, painters that save up all their stuff and come out and, donate to us depending on how often they have to move things out of their garages or warehouses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There are paint. Yes, we're not allowed to take oil-based paints or anything that's
Yeah, for the environment. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
hazardous to
Yep.
the environment. If we do end up getting some of those, we donate them to the local artists, which will use them in a different way. But we do encourage primarily latex paint.
Mm-hmm.
But we've had
Mm-hmm.
things.
And what about other household items? Because I know you mentioned the tires that he created a tree, and are there any other things that you would accept, or is it really mostly paint to kind of keep it going?
We accept a lot of things that we can use on the mountain. I mean, we just started asking for used tires. We're rebuilding some of the stairs that vanished over the years along the north side of the mountain, and we decided to use tires as a base to that, kind of go along with the. Leonard originally used clay, And unfortunately, the
Mm-hmm.
rain and the excessive heat in the desert just beats on the clay and it wore down, and eventually the steps disappeared. Uh, what it looks like right now, which is pretty much just a slope going up the hill. So we've decided we're going to rebuild and recarve those steps into that way. It's part of the Yellow Brick Road tour or path. That's the way we ask people to come down. So we started accepting, bad tires, but we've always taken hoses, bottled water, extension cords, paintbrushes, buckets, anything any supplies that you might use to paint, um, anything you might use in an art environment, those kind of things, we absolutely accept those. People often bring food too. I mean, you
That's
we
sweet.
often,
Well, they're just doing their part. Like they feel like they're doing their part a little bit.
yeah,
They think of salvation and religious connection, and they think donation and charitable.
yep,
So that may be
yeah.
why. Do you have any sort of aha moments where it was sort of this incredible surprise to you that someone had a certain reaction? Or sort of like for me, when you said someone's inspired and wrote a song, that's sort of like, whoa, an aha kind of moment for me, going, what a great way to utilize that space for someone who's an artist anyway. So, do you have any aha moments, even from just your average person who decides to go?
You see people completely change. Their affect changes. They come out and they have tears running down their face. Yeah, those are the aha moments for me, is when someone's been touched and no one's had to do anything to do that. And that's why we don't have, Leonard doesn't have, the mountain doesn't have a cult following, because there's nobody there trying to tell each person what they need to do,
Right,
how they need to think,
right.
what they need to feel. They just get to do and think what they want, and get what they want out of it. And I've had a few people tell me that they've had life-changing experiences there. They went there, they were homeless, they were on their way to Slab City to find a place to sleep under a tree, and they stopped at Salvation Mountain, and it changed their lives. Those are the aha moments for me, is seeing Leonard's vision, and his goal was to share that message, which he knew would impact people's lives. In 1967, when he met God, he met God in a way that not a lot of Christians meet God. He felt touched by
Mm-hmm.
the Holy Spirit, and shortly after that, he was in a church and speaking in tongues. So his experience was life
Mm-hmm.
changing for sure, and he was touched by God. We hope that happens to everybody that comes, but like you said in your introduction, again, very well put. You know, you have to come. You have to prepare yourself when you come on a mission like this to be touched by God. Uh, but in the meantime, for all those people who are just driving around the country trying to knock off a bucket list, when they get to this item, it usually gives
Mm-hmm.
them pause, and it makes them really think. And those are the aha moments for me, because we're doing what Leonard wanted. We're preserving this work so that they can have those opportunities.
Toward the end of our podcast, I don't know if you know this, but we always have a round of quick and gutsy questions that are just fun. And, usually I'll get a little pearl here and there. So if you are ready, I'd love to start with our quick and gutsies. You ready
Sure,
for them? Okay.
bring it on.
All right. What is at the top of your wish list for Salvation Mountain, but the answer can't be money or funding?
How many do I get?
uh,
In the
start with
short term,
one. Yeah.
in the
Go ahead.
short term, I wish that it would stop raining in California in the
Mm,
desert, so that we wouldn't have so much trouble with erosion.
yeah.
But my biggest wish, which I hope will come true, we actually have made some headway, is that we have a museum one day on the site.
Hmm. Yeah.
Where right now we're very close to starting to lease the property. The organization owns all of Leonard's intellectual rights to his art and his personal property, but we
Great.
don't own the ground that it's all sitting
Hmm.
on, which
Hmm.
belongs to the state. So I'm not going to use that as a wish, because that's going to happen. We're going to
Great.
lease the property, and eventually we will own the property. My
Wonderful.
biggest wish is that we eventually will have a museum just to the south of the actual historic site. Uh, we have hundreds
Hmm.
hundreds of pieces of Leonard's art that we can't display. We often get asked, and we do whenever we can. We send pieces around the country. We sent some to Chicago this year, or maybe that was last year, to the museum there. We would love to have all of Leonard's work on display, and we don't have a place to do that right now. His museum was intended to be that place one day, but unfortunately, he never finished it. And then on top of that, it's got some collapsing issues as well that we're dealing with right now because of the weather. So thank God that it didn't end up being the museum, because we have a real serious problem right now. But that's the biggest wish. We're going to have a museum one day.
Yeah, and then really people get to take it in, which is great. Yeah,
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
really wonderful. So when you're thinking about Leonard's art, are you ever thinking of you're really thinking of display, not ever selling it?
Yeah, no. We've broached the discussion a few times because he made these small little what we call pen sets. He would take his postcards and he cut pictures out and he put them in there and create these little things and use clay and caulk all on cardboard. He handmade the whole thing and he would give them as gifts. We thought about like auctioning them off or something, finding using as fundraisers, but we just decided we would rather keep that stuff and have it available
Right.
to see.
Because it's original. It's original too. You could get really high-end photographs of the work and be able to sell that as part of, and then it's much more affordable, but it also is a revenue boost and gets his art recognized all over the world when people want to purchase it, or, something like that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We've refrained from that up to now because some of the great photographers who've come out, like Larry used originally was one of the top photographers that came out. He had a complete collection of stuff. He created a book from it. So we didn't want to try to sell his stuff. And Larry's still alive. We still recently had communication with him. Maybe after he passes away, we'll start using his prints that way, because he's going to donate all of his stuff to the organization, to Spaces, which is an organization which archives all these materials. So yes. And then after that, Aaron Huey was a National Geographic photographer, known all over the world for his work. He's come out a number of times. He still comes out, and he's done lots and lots of shots there. And he makes them available on his site for sale. So we try to stay away from that, but in the coming years, I definitely get your encouragement point. That is a way we are looking to grow the stuff that we can have on our merch site, and those are some of the pieces we do reproduction prints.
Yeah, and even if you reach out to either one of them and say, could you do a series for us that is a donation, it would be a donation, they'd get a tax write-off, but you'd be able to use the funds to do the repairs. Just a thought.
Yeah, I'll actually make sure that Larry and Aaron both get the link to this podcast.
And here,
hopefully they'll be interested enough to watch it this far, listen to it this far.
Yeah,
they'll hear that amazing suggestion, and they're happy to help.
If you were to think of a song that describes Salvation Mountain, what would it be?
Oh, I guess the first one that comes to mind was "Let It Be."
Oh, I love that. That's great. Perfect song. Yeah. Both with your wish for the weather. Let it be. Let it be somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
And let it be for the individual who has their own experience. Perfect song. I love that. What makes Salvation Mountain gutsy? Because it certainly is gutsy.
Oh my God.
Yeah, where do you begin with that question, right?
Well, let's begin by the idea that we're trying to preserve a mountain that's made of paint and clay in the middle of the desert without any running water or any utilities. Let's then move on to the idea that we have a $50,000 to $60,000 annual operating budget, so that it's comfortable and for people to come, and porta johns, and we have Dawson's there and people that are protecting everything. And we don't have the income to cover it, so that's a pretty gutsy thing.
Yeah. Well, we got to work on that. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we've had to go head to head with the starting with the county and now with the state. Who could have up until recently just got the bulldozers out there and bulldozed the work away if they were bold enough to try. But you did mention something that rings a bell that I'd like to announce to those who don't know. In the Imperial County Board of Supervisors in January of this year, they did pass unanimously a resolution making Salvation Mountain a historic resource in the
Yay.
county. So,
Okay. Good for
yes,
you. So therefore, there may be some funding to support it. So they can't bulldoze it anymore. It's considered a historical site.
they can't bulldoze it anymore. Do they have money to support it? No, but they do have
Well,
a grant, a community grant process that our county supervisor just recently shared with me.
good.
Well, who is our biggest supporter, by the way, Ryan Kelly. In case he gets to see this, we love you,
Yeah,
Ryan. Thank you
kudos
very
to
much for
him.
everything you do. He just shared with us that the county does have a grant program that we can apply for, so we will be putting that application in this year before the year's up here.
What is something that maybe some outsiders or even a few insiders don't really know about Salvation Mountain?
The mountain has got a lot of these flowers that are three-dimensional all around it. It's got these flowers that are made of mounds, and he put his fist into. Lots of everybody knows, almost everybody knows about those. But there's other ones that are actually protrude, and they're dimensional that he created separately, and then he stuck onto the art in different places. Um, he actually started making those because he couldn't find a way to get rid of his empty cans,
Mm-hmm.
coffee cans, cat food cans. So we have a whole collection of these small flowers that would fit in your hand. And inside of every one of those flowers, there's a cat food can or a tuna can in there.
Oh, interesting. So that becomes the base, and then he works around them, and they become sort of the shape of a flower. Very cool. So he really reused. So he's incredible because he really reused whatever was there to create another piece of art. It's really he almost started the movement of, or not started, but he certainly was in the movement of, reusing materials into something else, recreating, repurposing, which is so fabulous.
Yes, repurposing without knowing, having any idea, in 1986, we didn't
Right,
talk about
right.
repurposing. We didn't use that word, right? So without having any idea of any of that stuff, his whole concept was to use whatever he could find around him.
If you could get one celebrity or influencer or someone either in your space or outside your space to endorse or talk about Salvation Mountain, who might that be?
Well, there's a long list of people that we'd love to have, but the most recent one that keeps coming to mind is Sean Penn.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he'd be
Yes,
great. Yeah,
Into the
invite him
Wild.
there.
Into the Wild
Mm-hmm.
was made a huge impact on Salvation Mountain and on Leonard.
Mm-hmm.
He
Mm-hmm.
first of all, he was got those residual checks, and he as soon as he got one, he would buy puzzles. And what did he do with the puzzles? He gave them away to everybody who
Yeah,
visited. So that was
yeah.
the one thing he enjoyed doing. And when Into the Wild was released and he started getting those residual checks, that that made his world a whole different place because now he could afford DVDs, puzzles, and postcards so that
That
everybody who
he could give
visited
away.
went home with a gift.
So, any other comments or thoughts before we close the podcast?
Just thank you for this opportunity.
Oh,
When
thank
you
you.
reached out, I had no idea what we were getting ourselves into.
Yeah,
Even looking at your introduction, because we didn't talk a whole lot about what the content was going to
right.
be. You just asked
Yeah,
me a bunch of stuff and then got me on here live and got me going.
yeah.
I just really appreciate you including us in this, including me
Oh,
in this and in our organization and Leonard's work. It sounds
yeah,
very much like the work has been influential in your life at some point. And
yeah.
probably a lot of your listeners, and for those who don't even know, they're now going to put this on their bucket list. They're going to want to go to
That's
Nyland,
what I'm
California,
hoping.
and see Salvation Mountain and experience it for themselves. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. How do people reach you if they are interested in donating or getting more information? What's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, our primary organization's website is www.salvationmountain.org.
Great.
We have a donation page there. We have lots of places where you can contact. All of our social media is shown there, so you can connect with us on Facebook, on Instagram,
Yeah.
on X, and YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, so we've got most of the social media covered. And our
Yeah.
organization's email address info@salvationmountain.org. If you want to contact us directly, I do screen those myself. So when they come in, you'll get personal attention. They won't just go into an inbox somewhere.
No, it's good for people to know
Yeah,
that.
we value
Mhm.
every communication we get. Anybody who reaches out to
Mhm.
us is important, because either they've come or they're going to come, and if they've already come, they've got something great to say, or if they haven't come, we want to make sure that they find their way there and everything goes well.
And
Uh,
my wish and hope is that you are sustainable and remain sustainable, because what you're giving people is another spiritual opportunity, another place to heal or become anew, or just have a moment to be. Let it be, the perfect
Let it
song,
be.
right?
Yeah.
So thank
Yeah,
you.
we don't hand out tracts or any of that stuff. People have gotten on us in the Christian community because we're not evangelizing
I
at the mountain.
love
Why aren't
that.
you evangelizing?
You don't need
Leonard
to.
was an
Right.
evangelist. Well, Leonard was an evangelist, but the first thing he did was always to share his story about how he met God, and he wanted to let the mountain do the rest of the
Right.
talking. So the evangelistic part of it was as simple as that. Um, so we don't. There's nothing. There's nobody wants to encourage you in any direction, and it really is a personal experience, as personal as it can be, and that's just what Leonard wanted. So thank you. That's very special.
And Bob, this has been just a joy. It's really been a pleasure. I really thank
Good.
you.
Thank you. I've had a good time too. I really appreciate this. Absolutely.
Please go to smallandgutsy.org to check out all of our episodes. And if you are so inclined, please purchase some Small and Gutsy merchandise, consider sponsoring an episode, or making a donation. Both are tax deductible to help keep us going and spotlighting these great organizations. The opinions and viewpoints expressed by our guests are independent and do not reflect the position or views of Small and Gutsy. Of course, we can't take responsibility outside of our own vetting of the organizations we interview, so before you sign on to support or work for them, we encourage you to do your own due diligence and research them as well.
I want to thank my partners in this endeavor, the Intrinsic Group, my incredible board of directors, Brianna Carmichael, John Gatto, Lucy Mello, Ari McCoy, Melissa Greitz, and Serena Rajabian, who believed in me and this project enough so to sign on and to support this effort, and all the folks, friends, and family who have guided and inspired me. And thank you for listening. Together, we are spreading social impact, and you can help us. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends. And don't forget to email me the name of any organization you feel would benefit from being interviewed. From small and gutsy to big with impact, I'm Laura Witkoff, and thanks for listening.